Hello, low ego action heroes. It's Debbie Levitt from deltacx.com, and it's December 22nd, 2020, and it's Tuesday, and that means it's time for office hours. Ask me anything. I'll be live for the next hour taking your questions, so please feel free to add any questions to the chat room or to, where else do we take questions? Chat room. And Twitter, hashtag DeltaCX, and of course anonymously at the link down here, deltacx.link/AMA. And today we have special guest Olivia. Olivia is the mom of the famous low ego action hero, so she might look familiar, but she's different. Different dog. Sleepy Olivia. So I'm going to wait for some of your questions to show up, and hopefully everybody is having a good day, doing well. Pretty good, right? Hopefully everybody's going to get some time off coming up. How about you? Time off? No, we're going to work. Got a lot of work to do. That was pretty good. Okay, thanks to Olivia for joining us. You want to go back? Okay, see you. See you later. Thank you for joining, Olivia. I hope you ask a good question. Let's go and check the board and see what's going on. Let's see, it says we're online. That's a good start. So now let's check if LinkedIn got notified, and we have a hello from Hannah. You like my special guest. Thank you. Shelley says that dog is the sweetest. Well, she's one of 5 sweetest. I've got 5 hilarious dogs, and she is one. That is Olivia, for those of you following the dogs on Instagram. No extra charge, of course. Oh, trying to fix my seat. Ugh. Whew. All right, so we do have a question that came in earlier, and I'm going to queue that up while I get ready to post the YouTube stuff here. How's everybody doing? Hannah, Shelley, how's it going? I hope you're going to be home and safe, if I may say so. Let's see. Okay, YouTube is now going to funnel to my little panel here. Yes, here it is. Okay, so let's start with a question that I got a couple of days ago, and it looks like this. Anonymous person said, we talk a lot about how to identify imposters and what makes a good UX or CX person, but I haven't heard much about what makes a good manager in the CX or UX space. Like, if I'm looking at companies, what are some red flags to look out for? So I think those are kind of 2 different questions. Shelley says, when does your tip jar start? It does not start yet. Thank you for asking. I'll answer that one quickly. It does not start yet because I don't have enough watch hours on YouTube to qualify. So if you get bored, you can binge watch this holiday season, and that'll help me get there. So there is a YouTube milestone I need to reach before I can turn on the tip jar. Thank you for asking. So back to the other question. Again, I think it's 2 questions. It's what makes a good manager, and also what should we look for when we're interviewing? So I'm going to focus a little bit more on that part of the question because I think that that's the heart of the question. So when you're interviewing, how can you know if you're going to have a good or bad manager? Now, usually everybody's on their best behavior. You're on yours, they're on theirs. No one, I mean, obviously bad things happened in interviews, but it's sometimes you can't, people are hiding some of their real aspects, if you want to put it that way. So I think that it's good to ask some questions that will help you understand what's going on at the company in ways that they should be able to answer. Like, what's your approach to research? Let's learn if they're doing any. Let's learn if this manager takes it seriously and fights for it. How do people in our department tend to make decisions? Who makes decisions about CX or UX matters? And how are those decisions made? If give me a little bit of an idea about that. I think that's probably not the best way to ask it, but you're kind of listening for, do product managers make decisions in the UX and CX realm more than we get to make decisions in our own realm? So you're listening for some sort of autonomy. You're listening for us to have some sort of power and ability to make our own decisions. I also tend to ask like, who am I answering to? And again, so if you're talking to your hiring manager, you know that, but if you're still being screened, that's a good early question, because I find that at companies where they say, oh, you're going to answer to an engineering lead, or you're going to answer to the head of IT, or, somebody else. Sometimes I find if I don't have a UX manager, that might be a difficult work experience for any of us. We really need a manager who understands us because they've been there. That's another way that we can look for a good manager. Check them out on LinkedIn. See what their career has been like. Is it a career full of good UX and CX work done with science and technique? You know the way that goes. Is it if they specialized in research, what did they do? Did they get an advanced degree in it? What do they know? And not everybody has to have an advanced degree in it, but sometimes people are impressed by those. Take a look at them on LinkedIn, because sometimes people go, oh yeah, we have this great manager and they're really creative and you're gonna love them. And then I look them up on LinkedIn and they have like 15 years as a visual designer. And I go, okay, again, I prefer to be managed by a UX practitioner, a UX specialist. Does that mean every visual designer is a terrible manager of UX people? Absolutely not. But it does mean that I'd rather be managed by someone who deeply understands what I do and is going to support it. Sometimes that's a visual designer and sometimes it's not. So I think some of the red flags we can look out for, especially while interviewing, have to do with how are decisions made? Do we do research here? Do we trust the research? Do we make decisions by it? Who does UX answer to, or who's going to manage me? I think some of those would definitely help. So I think that's mostly that. And this is Office Hours Ask Me Anything, so you can ask questions. And this week I promise to keep a better eye on the anonymous questions. If anybody would like to ask one, of course, that's at deltacx.link/AMA for Ask Me Anything. I usually hang out here for an hour, so you can throw any questions you like at me. Sometimes it gets a little quiet, but that's fine. I'm still here for when you have questions. I know a couple of days before Christmas, people are getting ready, and people are hopefully not traveling this year, but what can I tell you? Don't travel. It's going to be a little quiet here today. Don't have any cricket sounds I can set off. So my system's not showing me how many people are in YouTube. Usually I get a count of how many people are where, and I'm not getting that. But I imagine today will be on the low side with Christmas coming up. We've got 8 people in YouTube I'm now seeing. So thank you to you 8 diehards. No Christmas movie pun intended. Does anyone think Die Hard is a Christmas movie? I'm not so sure. And 4 people on LinkedIn. Thank you. Shannon says hi. Hi, Shannon. Let's see. We've got Ikening. Hey, Debbs, how are you? I wanted to find out if my portfolio pieces are largely under NDA, what's my workaround? All right, let's paste that in. Hey, Shannon, how are you? Okay, so what I would say when your portfolio pieces are under NDA, as many of mine are, this is a common thing. And so at the top of my portfolio, I say a lot of my work has been confidential. It's been under NDA. It's been at startups, or it's been products that were experimental and never went live. So I'm limited in what I can show publicly. So I've kind of 3 tiers of stuff. Shannon says, my husband says Die Hard is a Christmas movie. In what way? So Ikening, I would say, my world tends to fall into three things. Things I can show publicly, things that I could probably show someone privately in an interview but would never show publicly because it's mostly confidential, and things I absolutely can't show people under any circumstances because it was so private or confidential or internal or secret or whatever. There's just no way I can show it. So obviously for those things, there's no way I can show it. I can try to speak very generally to that project if I'm allowed to say I worked on it. So normally I can try to tell a very general story about that project, but I can't show it. For the stuff that I can show publicly, you show it. For that middle of the road stuff, which is like maybe I could show it at an interview, but I definitely can't put it in my portfolio. What I would probably do, and again, depending upon what I can do with the really confidential stuff, is I would try to figure out how much of the story can I tell. Maybe I can't show any of the artifacts. Maybe I can't say what company it was. Maybe I can't say what we were building. But maybe there's some sort of story I can tell about the process. Will that be compelling? Maybe, maybe not. You know, you're just gonna have to try it and see how it sounds, run it by somebody. But so I would see if there's a story you could tell about the project that doesn't give away details, but still sounds like you did something good. But it's hard. That's hard. And in the HR training that I'm writing, I do have a slide saying if people have very little portfolio or indicate in their portfolio that their work is NDA or confidential or whatever, that doesn't mean they're bad at this. That doesn't mean we weed them out. That doesn't mean we won't consider them as a candidate. We absolutely have to consider anybody who looks like a good candidate. And I do see the questions coming in. Thank you, everybody. So when your stuff is under NDA, again, for some things that I've done that were mostly confidential, but were kind of generic, like, wow, this really could have been any company. It wasn't that special, though it was a secret project and maybe it didn't go live. I do the scrubbed version. So I'll take my artifacts and I'll take off the company name, the text, the stock photos, the phone number, the email. I'll take off anything that could have identified who this was, or I'll blur stuff out and I'll try to show that. But again, that's only if I think that the project, once you blur that stuff out or remove it, looks very generic. So it probably wasn't anything innovative. It probably wasn't anything disruptive. I have a piece like that in my portfolio where it was some prototyping I did for a bank. And ultimately, it wasn't a groundbreaking thing, but I wanted to show off the prototype that I did to say, I can prototype the heck out of stuff. So in that case, I just took off all of the identifying information. So I would say there's a few different ways to approach this, but if you really can't put anything in your portfolio, I would still have a portfolio that says, unfortunately, I can't show things because of this, but I've worked on these types of projects and I tend to have this type of role and I use these methodologies and I approach things this way. I would still try to tell your story as best as you can, even if you can't show specific stuff. So there you go. Wilson, I see your question, but we got an anonymous one in between, so you are on the list. And let's make sure I'm not missing any more of the anonymous ones. Okay, looking good. Keep the questions coming, everybody. So an anonymous person says, "Hi, Deb. Thanks for doing what you do. Thanks for coming. If you didn't come, I wouldn't be doing it. I would be talking to an empty room. I'm currently a solo UX UI designer hired under the product team. That being said, you've hit some nails previous to this question submission. How do you know when you need to start looking for a new job as a UX practitioner?" All right, so let's talk about some of those red flags while you're at a job. We were just talking about before you get to the job you're interviewing. Now you're at the job and you're starting to wonder, can I stay here? How much longer can I stay here? Should I be applying? Oh, you're welcome, Ikening. And tell me if I'm pronouncing your name okay. So send me something phonetic. So I'm always afraid, even though you may have told me before I'm doing fine, I'm always afraid to mispronounce everybody's names. Shannon says, great anonymous question. Yeah, I tend to get great anonymous questions, so thanks to the viewers. So let's talk about some red flags at jobs. Number one, they want you to be an order taker. Now remember, I'm riffing, so I'll try to remember these as best as possible. Wilson says, I want to know this too. Great. So number one, they want you to be an order taker. I like to say there are two types of creative workers, short order cooks and interface scientists. We're interface scientists, but when we end up at jobs that want us to be short order cooks and just take orders and, hey, just make it look like the competitors, or hey, Apple's probably doing it right, rip them off, that's a bad place. And again, I'm going to list things that are bad that part of you is going to say, well, maybe I can change it. And I'm going to say, look, if you can change it, change it. But if you can't change it, it might be time to put on those boots and consider walking, or at least start interviewing and work on getting yourself out of there. So being an order taker is definitely one. UX being stripped down to pretty screens and visual design would be another for me. So if they say, we don't need research, we know what people like, and we don't have to test it. Engineering will spend 6 weeks building it and merging it and release it to the public, and then we'll see what people think. That's not agile, that's not lean, that's not anything good. So again, I try to break people out of those bad processes. I'll talk to agile coaches and scrum masters and managers, but if you can't change it, that's not your fault. That's the number one thing I want everybody to know. If you cannot make a bad workplace better, it's not your fault. You didn't break it, you can't fix it. You can try, but if you end up not being able to fix it, don't feel badly. We can't fix all the broken people and places. We can try, and then we've got to give up and walk away. So I would say those are two. Lack of managerial support, or of course a really toxic manager would be something that would make me walk pretty fast. I think, and sometimes you just have to quit even if you don't have that next job because it is affecting your mental or physical health. So give yourself permission to get out of that. So I would say, we did a previous podcast with Dr. Seth Finkel about gaslighting and narcissists and toxic situations at work. If you are experiencing those, if you are feeling set up to fail, if you are being gaslit, if you are being discriminated against, again, you can try to fight that. You can go to HR. HR is not always our buddy. It's really sad, but that's probably a good time to walk. Another one, a little less serious than that one, would be everybody's trying to do my job. If I'm working somewhere and the product manager wants to sketch screens and the engineers want to interview customers and the business analysts want to interpret my research, I'm probably not going to stay too long because I'm going to feel like, well, why'd they hire me? Everybody at this place seems to think they can do my job. And if I can't get a manager or somebody to clean that up, because that's a process problem and that's a culture problem. If I can't get somebody to clean that up, I am probably what we call a flight risk, which is an HR term, I believe, for somebody in danger of quitting. So if they are not letting me do my job, now I understand sometimes at jobs they don't give me all the time I need or the resources I need, or they say, oh, you want to do 3 weeks of research, we'll give you a week and a half. Okay, I understand sometimes there are compromises, but if I really can't do my job, or if everybody's doing my job, or if they want to turn me into a workshop facilitator, or they want to do everything by design by committee workshops, I'm not staying. That's not for me. Some people like those. I don't like this. Wilson says, I wish I heard this in March. Well, Wilson, you just got to come to the sessions and ask the questions. I would have told you. So these are a few off the top of my head. I'm trying to think of other ones where you should give yourself permission, at least to start applying and interviewing. But still, you can always bring things to managers and see if anything can be improved. But I find that at many organizations, the maturity of CX and UX is still low. There's sometimes hostility towards us and our profession because of misunderstanding. They think that we just do pretty screens. And so then they think, well, then anybody can do pretty screens, the product manager. These are places where we usually don't stay for long. And my advice to companies in HR is going to be, Keep an eye on the talent that's walking away from your company. And when it's really hard for companies to attract and retain good CX and UX talent, and they're done trying to let the product managers and the business analysts and the engineers and the marketers do it, hopefully they will wake up to what it's like to bring in a real CX or UX specialist and let us do our job. It's Agile Manifesto principle number 5. So if engineering wants to try to dominate everything, I'm not okay with that, but at least throw Agile Manifesto principle number 5 back in your face, which is give motivated individuals the time and support they need, or the time and environment they need, and trust them to get their job done. I want that one. We've got some more anonymous questions coming in. I see them, and I'm going to add them under a question we got in the YouTube chat. So I promise you're all on the list. And hold on, let me copy and paste some of these, because these all end up in the YouTube description, in the description. So you can always go to an old office hours, at least from the last 6 months or so when I've been doing these lists, and see all the questions that were asked. I do not have timestamps just because I suck and I don't have time to go back and timestamp everything, but at least you'll have a general idea of what was answered when, and you can try to skip around, or you can always watch it 1.5x or whatever you like. These are always archived. So we've got more questions coming in, and I promise I'm putting you all on the list, Ikening and Shelley. So you're on the list, but hi Kathleen, but you are low on the list, and more questions are coming in. So I'm doing my best. This may be where Super Chat helps us out later. I'm juggling as best as I can for a one-person show. So Wilson had asked a question, how does a junior level up to a mid to senior designer? Great question. So from junior, you would next go to mid-level, and then usually after mid-level, you go to senior. To me, these are discrete steps. There isn't a mid-senior job. To me, you're either mid or you're senior, and I mostly do these by years of experience. I recently ran a survey, and I asked the people who took the survey, and I think we had 80-something answers, and I asked people, how many years of experience do you expect from a junior, from a mid-level, from a senior? And it pretty much confirmed what I thought, which sounds like bias, but it was good. Juniors are, unfortunately, many jobs are asking for 1 year, but the survey people said no, that's 0 or 1 years. Mid-level was usually 2 to 4-ish years, so that's your next promotion. And then after you've put in a few years as a mid-level, you would be hopefully promoted to senior, normally around 5 years in the industry. Sometimes people are promoted a little bit prematurely. I'm generally against that unless they are freaking amazing, and I'm sorry, but not everybody's freaking amazing. So normally how you level up from junior to, say, mid-level is going to be 2 ways. Number one, you have to be working at an organization that believes in promoting people. Not all of them do. Sometimes they want to keep you junior forever because then you are low on the ladder and you get paid less. So make sure you're working at an organization that believes in promoting from within. That's another thing you can ask in a job interview, which is, hey, I'm at a junior level now. When do people tend to get promoted here at a senior or mid-level? Hey, I'm mid-level. When would I be promoted to senior? I think when I worked at Macy's, most people got promotions roughly every 2 or so years, which I thought was pretty fair. If they were doing a good job, you promote them. So make sure you're working at an organization that believes in promoting people and not having a junior with 4 years of experience. And then, of course, you might have to, the other part of it is if they are not doing that, you might have to ask for that. Hey, I'm a junior with 2 years of experience now. I'm looking to be promoted to mid-level. What's the path to that? It might just have to be a conversation you have with your manager to learn, how do I get from here to there? The manager has to have an answer. If the manager says, we don't really do that here, start interviewing. If the manager says, oh yeah, we do that after 3 years, okay, then you've got another year, but still ask them for details. Okay, is there any criteria by which I measured? Is there anything you need to see that I've done to know that I'm, ready for that promotion? So make sure you're having those conversations. Ask specific questions so you're not surprised later. So you don't go, okay, I'm at 3 years. Where's my promotion? Oh, well, we expect you to have done this and that. Don't be surprised later. If it's not clear, ask and keep asking for details, and that way you know what the path is, because each company is going to treat it differently. I can't say this is the way to go from junior to mid-level. It's mostly years of experience and someone believing that you are now no longer a junior, you are ready to be at the next level of proficiency. Shannon says there's a book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. I don't know that book, but Shannon says check out that book, and I trust Shannon. So let's see, we've got some more anonymous questions coming in. I promise I see these. I'm going to do my best to get through everything in the next half hour-ish. So let's see, where are we? Okay, we've got this question here. On an agile project, we're expected to deliver vertically sliced user stories each iteration. How can you vertically slice UX work on a user story? So this is where I end up having one of my many big problems with agile. And the problem is that engineering has somehow decided they are in charge of all of us. And no matter what we do or how we work or what our approach is, all of a sudden we have to do what engineers do. So I think the first thing I would do is try to have your manager work with agile coaches or scrum masters to say, look, unfortunately, we understand that you think in user stories and vertically sliced user stories, but this is not how we work, and you can't make everybody fit into the engineering mold. Now, my impression, and you can tell me if this is wrong, that a vertically sliced story is where a user story is too big and you've had to reduce it to smaller components. Is that right? Let me Google it and see what I can find. Or somebody in the chat tell me what is a vertically sliced story. So it looks like slice things based on simplicity, business rules, effort, variations. Oh, vertical. Nope, I'm not getting it. Let me see if I can find another. Whoever asked the question should be able to explain it to me. User story splitting, vertical slice. I'm Googling the heck out of this because I am not total. I know about slicing user stories, but I don't know vertical slicing and horizontal slicing. So I'm trying to check that out. Horizontal splitting, breaking features into work that's been done into layers. One story for the UI, one for the database, front end and back end are split into groups of subtasks. Well, that doesn't sound like a user story anymore, because a user story is in terms of what the customer needs, not what the database person has to do. So, a user story broken down vertically, smaller items still result in working demonstrable software or specific working feature useful to the user. A vertical slice is all of the layers. A new feature request would contain work bits. Okay, so it just sounds like slicing user stories. How am I doing there? Is that okay? So if we just answer the question more generally, the bottom line is, few of us think in terms of user stories. Few of us think in terms of sliced user stories. And it's really going to take a shift in Agile and in our businesses. And I'll be working on this next year, 2021, to stop having engineering dominate all of us. It doesn't make sense for engineering to say, here's how engineers work. Product has to work this way. UX has to work this way. Would they say marketing has to work that way? HR? Where's the boundary of this? So I think you have to talk to somebody there, start with your manager, and say that, as far as I can tell anyway, a vertically sliced user story is just a smaller story. But I've got some slides on this. You may want to find, let's see, which one is it? Go into the micro lessons and conference sessions playlist and look for my dev and UX. And I have a slide in there that explains that the smallest unit of work for UX is typically the customer's workflow. Not our workflow, not our process, the customer's process. Let me give you the example. Logging into a website. Now, engineers might say to us, all right, design the username field and give that to us so we can build it. Design the password field and give that to us so we can build it. Design an error message and give that to us so we can build it. But we don't think in terms of pieces that small. Engineering does, and that's cool, but we don't, because we think in terms of the user experience. The user doesn't think of the username field and the password field as separate islands. These are part of the customer's workflow and experience. That means we design them together, and we typically test them together. We wouldn't just test the password field and go, yep, it's good, people like it, go build it, engineering. So I try to explain this to people, and again, I have some slides, let me know if you need them, I'll certainly send them to you if you do, where I try to explain that the smallest unit of work for us, typically, we don't have to be waterfall and whatever, but we do have to think in terms of the customer experience, because we can't test just some micro sub piece of something and understand if it works for somebody who's trying to complete a task. We have to architect, design, and build and test the task. It doesn't make sense to architect and design and build half of the task and then find out later the whole task put together stinks. I have a slide on, Google Boeing's Starliner. Boeing got in big trouble, I think it was last year, because they had some process for one of their craft that if they tested it end to end, it would have taken them something like 30 hours. And they decided, we don't have to do that. We'll test it in little pieces, and then we'll just assume that it all works all together. And of course, as you can imagine from this story, it did not. And it was really bad and made the news. And they were like, oops, I guess we should have tested it end to end. So I have a few slides. Check the Dev and UX program that I do. It's about half to 2/3 of the way in on that program, but I talk about how that is the smallest unit of work we can do. So they should not expect you to just design a password field and send that over. You're welcome to show this to them as well. Blame it on me. Hi, everybody. That's not the way to work. That's not good for culture. That's not good for process, and it's not good for the end output, because we are thinking of user experience. We're not thinking of micro pieces. Yes, the experience is made of micro pieces, but we must test them all together. And I also have a slide where I show someone had installed like an automatic hand soap thing. You put your hand under it and the soap comes down. Someone had installed that over a power outlet. So when you go to plug in your power, you get wet soap on your hand and the power outlet. And the caption when I saw that was like, well, this is what happens when we do, when we do unit testing, but not integration testing. Whoa, engineering joke. It's very good. And my slide says, well, same for UX. This is exactly why we have to test whatever is the customer's task or workflow or process completely, rather than try to look at isolated pieces. So I'm going to call that one done and move on. I'm very happy to see Maria here. Hello. Maria, your question is on the end of a long list, but I will get there, I promise. We've got lots of questions today. All right, so let's see our next question. Keep them coming. And Wilson is saying some very lovely things in the chat. Can I just put this up and just say thank you so much. Let's see, can I send this? Here it is, Wilson, and we get a picture of Wilson too. Thank you for the great advice. I'm glad I found you. I felt so lost since the beginning of the pandemic and had so many unanswered questions. I'm glad you found me too. Please thank whoever connected you and this channel. I'm glad that you're here now. Let's look at our next question. What's your take on MVP release in agile product development cycle, and how does UX fit there? Also, see the Dev and UX presentation that I do. Again, I think the 45-minute version is up on the Delta CX thing, but I've got the 2-day version. We can go really long with this. in general, and I've got slides on this, in general, the idea of an MVP can make sense. The idea of working on a smaller version of the product to make sure we're going in the right direction can make sense. What doesn't make sense, and agile coaches and scrum masters in general don't seem to have figured this out, is that there is nothing agile or lean about guessing, and there's nothing agile or lean about having the entire engineering department code it, test it, merge it, release it live, and then reactively wait for us to find out what people thought of it. And especially in cases where what people thought of it is either, let's wait to hear if they complain to customer support, super slow and reactive, or super crappy, like let's run a survey or an NPS score and see if people are happy. It's not right either. We have to do qualitative research so that we can learn what's going right or wrong, not just do they like it? Because we cannot congratulate ourselves for releasing something if it's wrong for the customer. So the recommendation that I have in my talks, and you're welcome to show them this clip here or find the clip in my other talk, is that the MVP model can make sense when the MVP is during the CX or UX process. So imagine that someone has the idea for what the MVP will be. Okay, UX can now research that and make sure it is the right thing to start with, because it might be too little. If people are expecting their task to be improved or streamlined or completed, and you built something that addresses half of the task, that's not the right MVP. That's 2M and not exactly V. Those of you who don't know, MVP typically stands for minimum viable product, as in what's the least we could build to stand on one or two legs. So this has to happen during our process so that we can make sure this is the right thing to be built to satisfy at least some sort of user need and real stories. Then we need to architect and interaction design that. Then we should prototype it, and then we should be testing it on real or archetypal customers. Then we will have the feedback we need to know if this MVP is going in the right direction and is worth coding. Because let's face it, there are lots of MVPs that are not worth coding. They end up being wrong for our customer, either not enough to solve their problem, or the wrong solution, or the wrong problem, or there's so many things that can go wrong. You're more likely to get it wrong than to get it right. So imagine if all of that could happen during the UX process, which is of much lower expense and lower risk to the company than when it happens in the engineering and after the engineering process by releasing this to the public. Now the Verge can write about us and TechCrunch can write about us and our stock price can go down because this is the garbage that we put out. And there's nothing agile or lean about waiting all of those weeks until we put that out into the public to sit back and wait to hear if people like us today. So I think the best way to approach the MVP release, and again, many agile and scrum people are not going to disagree because they are, it's funny enough, they're not agile. They don't go, oh yeah, why do we do that? Why do we spend weeks coding something that when it's a guess? It's an idea we haven't vetted, when UX could be vetting these ideas through their process, their user-centered design process and their prototyping and their usability testing. Like, that would make sense. So I'll be pushing much harder on that in 2021. But I think that that's a much better use of the MVP than what's typically done now, which is a lot of guessing. And remember, MVPs were mostly invented for startups who had to get something out quickly so they could impress investors. If you're not at a startup, this doesn't apply to you. And the MVP might not be the right way to go. So again, we have to stop being sucked in by some of these fake lean and fake agile things that in some case were invented for startups with nobody who worked in UX. So we're just going to guess and put something out there and impress investors that we can get stuff out there. Sorry for that long version, but I'm really on fire about that one. Next question. Aditayo is here. I was working on a health app and the MVP was a bit confusing. The scope of the product is not so wide. I then pushed for the full product features to go at once to avoid redundancy. And sometimes that just works. I'm working on a project now, which I'm hoping will be out to the public in Q2, though it's going much slower than I'd hoped. My fault, of course. But I don't want to do an MVP because I have competitors. It doesn't make sense for me to release less than what they do and then try to compete against them. I've got to put out a really full version 1 that says, okay, I may not have built every feature, but we built a lot of features and we're better than those guys. So the MVP is not always the right way to go because, again, MVPs were mostly for startups trying to impress investors that they could build fast and release to the public. But that was back when it was really hard to find a good engineering team. It's much easier now to find good engineering teams. But back then it was like, and I remember being in Silicon Valley and working with startups during this time, and it was like, yeah, but can they ship? Well, now the problem's not shipping. Now the problem is, did you ship garbage? So I don't know if you were right or not to do that. You're asking as a follow-up, but it sounds like a better way to go. To me, I think we don't, the MVP is usually not the best way to go. Next question was back here somewhere. Here it is. Ikanang. Is there any difference between UX design and experience design? I've had someone try to tell me there is, but then they couldn't explain it. I do have a short perspectives video on this in the perspectives playlist. Please feel free to binge watch those. But I cannot tell the difference yet. You know, I think that there are some things in CX and UX that we can try to break down, like there's a difference between information architecture and interaction design. There's a difference between research and interaction design. There's a difference between service design and some of these things. But UX design, considering UX is user experience, I'm not sure that there's a difference between user experience design and experience design. To me, this is one, what I see experience design being used for are people who feel the way I do, that UX is so misunderstood, we pretty much have no chance to redefine it. You're not going to convince people who think UX is sketching pretty screens that it's really all of this. And so I'm calling it CX because I think it needs a better name, and some people are calling it experience design, thinking that's going to be a better name. Maybe it is. I'm going with CX because that's a part of our organization that's already respected. So I'm trying to go where the respect is. Experience design is just another term that doesn't currently exist in many organizations. And as I like to say, you know, there are big famous consulting companies doing lots of webinars on your customer experience. This is a term that's out there that people know and that they mostly respect. But experience design, I think, is too close to UX design to make the change I think it's trying to make. So that's a bit of a preference, but that's what I think they mean. But you're going to have to ask the people using that term what they mean. Woo! Let's see. Next question, I think, was an anonymous one. Yeah, Solomon says, I'm rolling on the floor laughing. Experience design, user experience design. Which do you do? Ha ha ha. Yes. All right, next question says, do you have any strategies for developing when you don't have direct access to customer nor have the needs, habits, motivations, fears of the audience being sufficiently researched? Okay, so my impression of this question is, what do you do when you're not allowed to talk to customers and you feel like you don't really have enough information about the audience to start doing your work? I've got a whole section on this in my book, and basically it's a list of plan B things you can try to do when you're not being given direct access to customers. Let me open up my book in the background and see if I can find that. There's somewhere there's a list of me reading these, but I don't know where that went. Let me try to pull up my own book. Does anyone know what folder it's in? Let me look. Hold on. Books, Delta CX. Final paperback. Yeah, final paperback should be good enough. Let's search for it. Let's see if I can search my Word document and find it. Ah, so many good memories of what's in this book. Ah, feels good to see my old book again. Sorry, I'm looking. Okay, I didn't find it. I know it's here. It's trying to remember some of the text that's in it. Ew. I'm having trouble finding this. I am so sorry. Basically, one of the main things that I try to do is I try to interview as many other people as I can. So if I cannot talk to customers directly, I try to talk to everyone who talks to customers. Again, not as good as talking to customers, and you're going to have to put that in your documentation. Say, this is a risk of the research that I did. This research was more secondary. I talked to people who talk to people, but I didn't get to talk to the people. That is a risk. So I would say I try to talk to everybody else. So basically, I try to talk to customer support. I see if I can read any of their tickets or get an export of their tickets. I see if I can listen in on any calls. I will talk to salespeople. Who isn't buying this? Who's turning us down? Why are they leaving? I might talk to marketing. Sometimes they don't know as much as sales knows. I will talk to everybody I can that I think has any knowledge of the customer, even though, again, I have to remember they're going to paint it with a broad brush and they might put in some of their own conclusions or biases. So again, it is flawed, it is imperfect, but it sometimes gets me a lot closer. Hold on, there's a question coming into LinkedIn that I'm having trouble making sense of. Let me just ask a follow-up question. What do you mean foot? I don't understand foot in this context. Foot? And I see some more questions have come in. I promise I see you. You will get your answers. You're on the list. Okay, so I think when you're not given access to people, you're going to have to, number one, document that. Make sure that you've written down in your report or your documentation that normally where we start is to observe customers or interview customers or one of the, you put these things in. But I was not allowed to do that, and therefore I had to get my information more secondarily. This has the following risks. This has the risks of the information being untrue, of being flawed, of being biased, of being seen through somebody else's eyes or perceptions, and this can lead to risk for our company because now I'm guessing slightly better than I was before. So I will add your question to the list. Adetayo. The list is growing. So that's normally what I would do. I would just talk to everybody I can to learn what I can about our customers or target customers. It is more secondary. It's not the best way to go. But I usually don't like surveys because they're even more flawed and they can be badly written and they can be worse biased. So that's usually the direction I take. But do yourself a favor. Don't just do it and swallow it and say nothing. Make sure your documentation calls out that this is not how user-centered design is done, and this is not how user research is done, and that this creates risk for the company, that by not learning about our customers directly from our customers, we are creating risk. We could be more likely to build the wrong thing. We might be more likely to not understand people's problems and therefore build the wrong thing. So make sure you're documenting the risk so that if this gets messed up later, you can say, you didn't let me do the right research the right way. I warned you about this. So warn them about it early and keep warning them about it. Let's take a look at some more questions. Anonymous question, I think. How would you address a work culture where every single customer request gets approved automatically? I can't seem to get the platform under control, but sales and CEO keep auto-approving projects that just keep adding to the bloat. Yeah, this sounds like another one where if you can't fix this, you're leaving. I would be talking to my manager. Hopefully you have a UX manager, but possibly not. And I would be saying that this is not proper process, that normally when we consider features and epics and what customers need, we do proper research, and then UX and product or program or portfolio are working on prioritizing what features we're going to create and when. And we cannot have a company where the CEO and sales are just saying yes to everybody, and then we have to scramble to do these things that in many cases are not the right thing to build for people, or who knows, sales might have said yes to someone who's not even a customer and we're building it in the hopes that they sign on. That could be very spendy. So I think that, and I've worked at a place like this. It was a smaller startup where everyday engineering asked the CEO what he wanted that day, and that's what they built. And they had basically never shipped the product because it was changing almost every day, because the CEO would change his mind or shift to a new priority. And you have to talk to someone there because you have to tell them this has no overarching strategy. This has no CX or UX strategy. This has no product strategy. This is just a bunch of people yesing and shaking hands and slapping everybody on the back and saying, we'll build that for you. But it's not really the right thing for the company. It's adding to the bloat. It could be hurting other customers, paying customers' experiences. And a smart company has to look at these requests, put them in the bucket with everything else, research to see what is really going on here, and then appropriately prioritize them. If they're not going to do that, then you're probably not going to stay, because that is a wacky way to work. And I always like to also remind people, you know, what company do you admire the most? Oh, Apple or whatever. Do you think they do this? You think Tim Cook shows up and says, hey, everybody, guess what we're building? Everybody stop. So it's funny how people always admire certain companies or leaders and quote them and then don't do anything like them. So if you love Apple or whoever, do it that way. I would pick Disney parks, of course. I think our next question is finally from Maria. Okay, so we've got, hey Debbie, where does task analysis fit into the design process? Can it be done after a customer journey map? Thanks. Thanks to you, Maria. So what I would say is task analysis to me is really part of research, because it is one of the things that we're able to do after qualitative research. After observing people and or interviewing them, we now have enough information to map out what their task is. I typically would do this instead of a customer journey map. A customer journey map is like a task analysis, but way, way sadder. If for some reason you have to do a customer journey map because your company expects it or your school expects it, then you're doing a customer journey map. But I think the task analysis is going to be more detailed and more powerful. So I think if I had to do them in order, I would probably do the task analysis first, and of course its close cousin, the optimized task flow. And then if somebody wants to see a customer journey map, they probably just want a boiled down, simplified task analysis. So once you have the task analysis, you'll probably be able to say, oh, okay, these are their general steps, and I know from interviewing them or observing them some of their feelings, and I can see some opportunities here. Okay, I'll make a customer journey map. So I would say you could do them in the other order. There's no rule about this. You wouldn't get points off. But normally for me, I try to start with the bigger thing, which would be the task analysis, and then do the smaller thing or the sub thing or the derivative thing. And to me, that would be the customer journey map. So I think it would be easier to start with the big giant thing and then make the smaller variation. That would be my thought. So I see more questions coming in. Thanks to everybody. So we also had a question. I think it was here. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. but I think someone had asked, do you know a few differences between UX in US and in Europe? I think, I'm not too sure what you mean by that question. Is that jobs? Is that how it's done? I think around the world, we're all mostly using a lot of the same techniques and approaches. Some are better and some are worse. But, you know, user-centered design is available around the world. Its variation double diamond is available around the world. UX jobs in US and Europe pay differently depending upon where you're located. But, and then Europe, like the US and Europe, they're both very city-based. You know, a lot, I mean, well, now that we have the pandemic, people are more open to remote, and that's good. But I typically see UX jobs as being like very hot in certain areas. Like for the US, San Francisco and New York and Dallas and Denver and sometimes Chicago, sometimes LA. These are hotspots for UX jobs. Europe has Oslo and Stockholm and Vienna and London, I think, as some of the hot places to get jobs. But I'm not sure what the differences would be between UX in the US and Europe. When I speak at UX conferences in Europe versus US, people use the same terms, people understand the same approaches, people have the same problems at their jobs. So I'm not sure there's a big difference. We got a question, and this is certainly quite general, and it says, how to start in UX? Yeah. I think the best answer to that, to keep it short, is I have a playlist here. So if you come to the Delta CX YouTube channel, and of course, won't you please subscribe and press the bell so that you know when I'm live or putting up videos, and of course empathize with the like button. Please let the YouTube algorithm know that you're enjoying this, and join Slack if you'd like. So I would go into the playlist that is Learning UX and Career Transition. Learning UX and Career Transition has a whole bunch of videos that are going to say, how might you get into UX? I realized that in one of them, I recommend a boot camp called UXDI. I'm not recommending them as strongly as I did at the time, but outside of that, I think all of my advice from that playlist still stands and should certainly answer your questions. And I see Shannon has a question, and hers will go on the list. All right. Next is Adetayo, who says, writing has been big trouble for me. Any tips to get myself into the writing process? Maybe. I don't have a problem with writer's block or not getting into the writing process. So I might not be the best person to advise, only because I don't struggle with this. But I find that if I start writing and the vibe's not just right, like I'm not feeling clever or I'm a little bit low energy, I don't push it. I just save it for another day. So I think that it's one of those things where you just have to really be in a good space for it. Good energy, healthy food, clear mind, distractions gone. But even so, if you're having a day where you're not feeling it, don't do it. You know, I know some people are like, I have to write 500 words every day. And I say, why? No one's standing over you doing that. No one gives you an award when you're done going, hey, you wrote 500 words today. So I would say wait for days when you feel really passionate and inspired, and try to do some writing on those days and limit the amount of time you do it. You know, try writing for an hour. Don't put aside a whole day. 8 hours of writing is really tough. Even I probably wouldn't do that. So maybe try that, and I hope that helps. We are technically out of time, but we have 2 more questions, so I'm going to answer those today. And if any more questions come in, I'm sorry, I will have to answer them next time. I'm here every Tuesday doing Office Hours Ask Me Anything. And of course, won't you please binge watch the channel during the holiday season? There's plenty of good stuff in there that you can watch even at 1.5x or faster. So poke around the playlist playlists and check out different videos and see if there's more topics that would answer your questions. There's the perspectives videos, which are generally short and answer one question, usually in under 5 minutes. And then there's lots of long videos as well. So let's take a look at our last two questions. One comes from Ikening, and it looks like this. Is UX design a vertical position that one grows into over time, or is it a parallel field of practice? And then he said, sorry, I meant to say, is UX strategy vertical to UX design? Okay, so let's fix that. Is UX strategy vertical to UX design? All right, let's try that. So the way I see it is that as people progress as UX practitioners, they just tend to get more and more strategic. First, you'll be more and more strategic about projects. You'll say, aha, I now know how long these things tend to take based on projects like this, and I'm getting better at estimating my time, and I'm getting better at knowing which things to do and which things not to do. Like, you know what, this time we don't need a customer journey map. So you'll start by being more strategic at the project level. Above that, you really have to end up being a manager or higher to be strategic for the team or the department or the company. So that's not exactly yours to control. So you can start by being strategic about your project, as soon as you've grown into that. But when it comes to UX strategy more as part of your job, that is usually for managers, directors, VPs, and higher. The people who aren't doing the day-to-day work anymore, because most of their job has to do with strategy, managing people, operations, and other initiatives. So I would say that UX strategy is a little bit vertical to these things. We can start to bring some strategy in while we are still individual contributors, as they're called, or a worker bee, as I say. And so you can start to be a bit strategic, but chances are you're not really going to be a strategist in that sense until you are able to determine and create standards and policies and strategies and approaches for multiple people or a department or a team or the company or something like that. So in that sense, you're probably going to need that vertical promotion to be allowed to be more strategic, because otherwise, without that promotion, they expect you to just do the work. They expect you to do the research, the wireframes, the testing, whatever. So chances are you will need more of a vertical promotion to be able to be more strategic, but you're always welcome to start being more strategic about your project. And our last question comes from Shannon. And Shannon says, how do you define a UX researcher / analyst versus UX strategist in terms of roles and responsibilities? Okay. So a UX researcher to me is someone who is doing the day-to-day work of planning research, executing research, interpreting research, and all the things that go in between. Recruiting the participants, managing the participants, writing the reports, crunching the stuff, playing back the videos, making the clips. So the researcher, and of course making all the artifacts and coming up with the insights and the opportunities. So to me, the researcher, again, at the individual contributor worker bee level, is mostly going to be doing those things. If somebody has the title of UX strategist, it depends. I guess hypothetically they could be a researcher who is trying to say that some of the output of their research is going to be strategic suggestions for the project, the team, the department, the company. I tend to call myself a UX strategist, and that's because I try to bake strategy into everything I do, whether that's being strategic at the project level or having my research have some aspect of a strategic approach to where we could go with UX. Well, I'm not always in that position, though, to enact that strategy. I can say at the end of my research, based on what we learned, here are some really important directions our company should go in or our product should go in. Maybe none of those happen if I don't have the title or seniority or position to make those things happen. And that kind of matches a little bit of the previous question. Thanks, Caroline. Have a good Christmas too. I'll be here, but not online. I'll be online, but not live. So I think that, and then as for, I have not seen too many jobs that say, hi, we're looking for a UX strategist. To me, typically the UX strategist, if it were an individual job, is really built into like UX director or higher, because now these people are not doing the day-to-day work, and they're probably not dealing with too many direct reports. You know, the managers report to them, so it's more of a delegation world. Now at a director level, you are free to really focus more on what is going on strategically. What are we going to focus on in our department? What are our standards? What are our values? How do we approach projects? How do we collaborate with others? All of these are strategic. What do we do that ensures that we are shooting for a 5-star out of 5 product? How do we measure our successes and failures? What are those criteria? How do we decide how we assign different people to different project? How are we connected to the teams that we're on? Are we kind of an internal agency? Are we more embedded in these teams? To me, these are mostly strategic decisions, some operational decisions, and to me that comes with a higher degree of seniority, because if my title is senior UX architect and I write up a document that says how to do that, everybody goes, thank you very much for your ideas. So I think that we can all be strategic in our work, and the longer we've worked in CX or UX, the more strategic I find we can naturally be, and you are going to bake that into the things that you do. You're going to be strategic about your information architecture. You're going to have strategy suggestions or operational suggestions or improved process suggestions or priority suggestions in your research report. So I wouldn't say don't do that because you don't have a strategist title. Do it. For sure, do it. But also recognize someone might not follow through on it. So I would say that's a little... Shannon, do you have a follow-up question? Am I close to what you were hoping to hear? Because I don't think there really is a job called UX strategist. But let's go to LinkedIn and let's search. I'm going to go to LinkedIn jobs and I'm going to put in quotes UX... Oh, if I could get LinkedIn to stop popping crap up at me, this would be great. UX strategist, and I'm going to ask it for that worldwide, and let's see if any jobs come up. Okay, 75. That's not a lot. And not all of them say UX strategist. Some of them say UX designer, CRO strategist, which is sometimes a little bit more in that marketing department. So some of these jobs, here, some of them say content strategist, some of them say senior interactive producer. So I think if we try to whittle it down, we would have to try to find the jobs that really do say senior UX strategist. But yet when I'm looking at these jobs, it says you will create wireframes, you will synthesize research, you will do lean UX. Kill me now, kill me now. That doesn't sound very strategic. That sounds very tactical. So remember, you usually have operations, strategy, and the tactical, which is the worker bee stuff. So this says strategist. It doesn't sound strategic. Here's another job. UX strategist. We are looking for a UX strategist. We promote Ask Me Anything sessions. Hey, I qualify. Good news. Basic knowledge of HTML, proficiency in design and prototyping, accessibility mindset. You guys know me. I don't believe in mindsets. I believe in low ego action heroes. We've got to do these things, not just have mindsets. Thought leadership. Yeah, so what is this? This is another UX unicorn job, calling itself UX strategist. I'm not falling for it. Here's another one. Shannon says, pretty much answered it. I have a team member who wants me to move from UI designer to analyst, but I consider myself a strategist. I don't think analyst is a bad place to go, and it could get you to where you're going to. It really depends on how your company sees analyst, because as you can see, I interpret user data and strategize a plan moving forward. Yeah, I think that if that's what you can do, if they call it analyst, you can still bake a mountain of strategy into that. But again, it's really up to what the company will let you do, because now I'm looking at jobs that say UX strategist, and these aren't strategic jobs. These are do the research, make the wireframes, do user interviews, build lasting relationships with stakeholders. So I would say hypothetically, analyst could be a good direction for you to go in, especially if you're hoping to be more strategic or more leadership later on. I think that sounds like a term that we respect more than just researcher or just UI designer or something like that. But again, it really depends on the company and the job and things like that. So I would say if it feels like a match to what you do and where you're trying to go, I like the analyst title, and I would say explore that. Ikening says, thank you so much for sharing your insights. Debbs, I learned a ton. Thank you. I like to see everybody every Tuesday and see what you're all thinking about. And Shannon, do you have a follow-up question? Because we are running late, but I want to make sure you feel complete before I wind down for the session and do something about my crazy hair, my crazy eyebrows. Well, while we wait to see if Shannon says, I got your book. I've got some holiday reading. Yeah, it's the length of that's Larry Marine, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. So it is a biggie. You're going to, do it in small bites. But hopefully it's challenging in areas and fun in areas. And, I did the best I could to pack a lot of fire into 191,000 words. So I am complete. Very good. We are complete. So in that case, I will wind down for today. Thanks again to everybody for joining. Remember, the number one thing you can do is tell other people about the channel, because I want to help as many people as possible. And as we heard today, Wilson is like, why didn't I know about you in March? And I say, I don't know. So remember, this is all free. I'm not charging for it. I really just want to help people and get some good words out there and empower you and empower UX. I know empower is sometimes a cheesy word, but I mean it. So the best thing you can do for me is keep telling people about the channel. Tell them to subscribe and join in for the live sessions. And hopefully over the next 2 weeks, I'll get some more perspectives videos edited. I think I shot 20 or 30 of them. So there will be a lot more. So, subscribe and hit that bell so you know when those are up, and you can binge listen to them while you are baking a turkey or whatever everybody's doing. Before we go, what's everybody going to eat if you are doing the Christmas thing? I am non-religious, so I might just have some pork. I don't know. I'll have whatever's in the freezer, especially since we might be on mini lockdown. Thank you, Aditayo. Thanks for coming and asking your questions. Good luck with your writing. But let's just ask everybody quickly, what's for Christmas dinner? Or if you're, if you do not celebrate Christmas, what is for Friday dinner? And once I know, I can relax and call it a day. Boop, 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 boop. Things popping up on the screen. Shannon says some kind of beef roast. Maybe corned beef? That sounds like something you have to know in advance. Like, doesn't corned beef have to sit in brine for 47 years or something? So, Solomon says lots of chicken tenders. Oh, chicken tenders are delicious. I'm with you. Hannah says pot roast, squash, and pears. Oh, schmancy. Schmancy. That sounds really good. And Solomon says, lots of chicken tenders. Yes, I got it the first time. You are going to have a lot of chicken tenders. Next time I'm going to ask you how many, so count them. and weigh them. I want to know how many grams. Let's have metrics. Let's have success criteria for chicken tenders. Sounds like people are going for giant chunks of beef and butternut squash. Hannah's really doing the big spread there, Hannah. Holy cats. Kathleen says, shrug. Nothing planned this year. Maybe something from my favorite restaurants. If they're open and you can get takeaway, sure. Mohammed says, I'm from a multi-religious family, so turkey, too much gravy, and a lot of sleep. Good idea, Mohammed. Maria says, lentil loaf. Maybe Maria is vegetarian. Lentil loaf probably sounds good to my vegetarian boyfriend. Aditayo says, yam flour and salmon fish. That's interesting. An African recipe. I can't eat salmon. I'm allergic to it, but it sounds really good. So I hope people will look that up and try it. Ikening says lasagna and salad. I'm going to just make a face at you there. Well, it sounds like everybody has some great meals planned. I don't know what I'm going to make. Hannah says my husband's doing all the work. Very good. You stand back with like your magic wand and be like, and do that. And now do that. And do that. But good. I'm glad Gary's doing all the work, and you get to take it easy and enjoy the proverbial fruits of the dinner. So again, thanks to everybody for hanging out with me. Sorry this one ran so long. Eventually we'll have to keep them shorter to an hour, and we're probably going to have to come up with a system where not every question gets answered, because we just have so many people starting to join live, which is great. I'm happy that we have a growing audience, but we're just going to have to figure out how to balance all of these questions. So if you have any ideas, let me know, because I hate to say no to anybody, but we have to figure out what to do with all these questions. So I don't know if that's going to be super chat or send them in ahead of time or vote them up or something. So, well, I will work on that, and I hope you will too. Maria says, you're right. Oh, good. Well, then send over your vegetarian recipes for my boyfriend. He can always use some new ones. So, all right. I'm going to play us out of here, but everybody be well. Binge watch over the holidays. Be safe. Wear your mask. Stay away from grandma. And just do the best you can in these wacky times. And hey, don't forget, we'll be back next Tuesday to do office hours. And we'll also be streaming next Wednesday, the 30th. We're going to do a live anonymous mural board to take a look at some of our 2021 goals. It's a little cheesy, but I hope everybody will join in and think about their goals or lurk and steal other people's goals. On that note, be well, and if you're doing Christmas, happy Christmas, and catch you soon.
Thanks for watching. Delta CX is available for consulting and projects related to CX and UX strategy, leadership, training, problem finding, problem solving, and innovation. Learn more at deltacx.com.